My name is Dr. Peter Lugten. In this presentation, I will demonstrate that free will is a genuine, real property of the human condition. I will use as a context the talk of Sir Karl Popper in his essay of Clouds and Clocks, presented at the Arthur Holly Compton Memorial Lecture at Washington University, St. Louis on April 21st, 1965. Many contemporary philosophers and neuroscientists believe that our choices are decided by either a hard or soft version of determinism, and that free will is either incompatible with determinism or, to a weak and poorly defined extent, compatible. Popper regarded physical determinism as a nightmare, and in his lecture of Clouds and Clocks, proposed that through a concept he called plastic control, our behavior could escape both being determined and being subject to the whim of random chance. Although he proposed a number of ideas as to how plastic control might work, including feedback and interaction with his concept of World 3, or objective knowledge, he did not explain what was occurring in our neural circuits. And I'm not convinced that he proved his plastic control mechanisms could escape being arguably predetermined. What is the difference between hard and soft determinism? To begin, let me clarify what might be meant by predetermined. According to the hard version of determinism, some superintelligence could, in theory, track the trajectory and collisions of each particle that emerged from the inchoate universe, know where they all are now, and predict where they're going in the future. I agree with many scientists and theorists that this would be, in principle, impossible. How is soft determinism different? In the soft version of determinism, a defendant might claim that a combination of genetics, upbringing, and bad luck made commission of the crime inevitable, beyond any hope of self-control. Philosophical incompatibilists claim that indeed the defendant's circumstances are incompatible with the idea that the defendant had free will. Compatibilists argue that in some weak, poorly defined sense, the defendant might have done otherwise, or at least was a moral author. I will consider some advances from the work of neuroscientists to show that Popper's idea of plastic control has a neurological basis able to surmount both soft determinism and chance through the emergent process of consciousness. How does consciousness arise? Dr. Antonio Damasio, in The Feeling of What Happens, describes an extended form of consciousness in which a pattern of thoughts and expectations based on subconscious processing relates awareness of our environment to our self-awareness. In addition to having a sensory model of the external world, the brain maps each body region such that perturbations register as sensations or feelings, and then trigger homeostatic corrections. These activities then generate their own map, which enables the individual to feel how it has been affected by the changes. This ability to feel the changes provoked by our minds allows the brain to logically infer that it is the cause, creator, and owner of the body tissues, its mental feelings about those tissues, and all of the activities it directs involving those tissues. How do we consciously decide to act? Damasio believes that the conjunction of the maps results in a core consciousness which is recognized as a property of the individual and which creates the autobiographical self. This stream of thoughts depends on a subconscious that perceives, solves, and acts on problems and, with a brief delay, conveys to the consciousness the minimum amount of information necessary to understand the situation. Studies refined by Benjamin Libet showed that voluntary movements are initiated in the cerebral cortex a third of a second before we become aware of making a decision to act. But, he wrote, apparently the conscious mind could intervene in the final stages of heightened neurological activity either to block the already initiated movement or let it pass. Now, a lot of people have worked on this problem and investigated it since then, and some neuroscientists have concluded that the brain activity before apparently becoming aware of a conscious decision to act proves that we're like zombies and that our belief in a free choice is an epiphenomenon on top of a process that was already concluded without our being aware of it. But more recently, scientists have swung the other way and believe that the neurological activity being recorded in these experiments is not directly a correlate to the decisions we're making in real time in our mind, and that they're not really relevant to the question of whether we have free will or not, and would agree with Benjamin Libet's actual conclusion that we can either block the already initiated movement or let it pass. What does our consciousness say about our decisions? Consciousness is left-sided. In patients with surgically split brains, the left hemisphere, which contains the language center, has the conscious ability to word our inner voice. It will happily invent lies to fill in a consistent narrative if it has to account for an unknown input given to the right side. Dr. Michael Gazzaniga, who discovered this, named the responsible network on the left side the interpreter. If conscious decision-making activity occurs a third of a second after the decision has already been made, why do we bother to verbalize it consciously? Well, first, in order to justify our decisions to others, they have to be understandable in words to ourselves. Secondly, in order for us to be able to remember the detailed reasons for a decision, we need to store worded memories. Third, in order for a decision to be recognizably personal one, for which we accept responsibility, it must be articulated verbally, balancing pros and cons, assessing consequences, and mentally preparing for them. This reinforces the validity of the decision-making process as being consistent with our character. How do we explain our will? Our will, or the urge to act in a certain way, is best explained by using a modular theory for problem solving, including a character module to mediate the others. Each potential solution to a problem or decision on how to behave next is represented by a module or specific pattern of neural oscillations. What are some of the constraints on our will? In choosing between them, the character module performs a homeostatic function of maintaining our sense of self. It is likely to be as finicky about maintaining a consistency of self-recognition or personality as the medulla oblongata is about maintaining a steady blood pressure. Our choices will be constrained by, but not determined by, a sense of context and consistency, and a conscious desire to maintain a sense of character and responsibility. The subconscious chooses from among several contenders what it expects to be an appropriate course, but just before acting, we become conscious of approving or vetoing it. Yet the theory also accounts for the ability to make surprising decisions. How does free will take place in the mind? My theory works in the following way. The conscious mind is a problem-solving device forever seeking answers. A common problem is, what shall I do now? That I could run down the street singing hallelujah won't get too far. But ideas in keeping with character, such as putting on the kettle or making a phone call, will compete with repetitive excitation of oscillating modular nerve patterns until one idea expands to dominate the cortex, exceeding the threshold for implementation. How can dynamic feedback loops change our character? In order for the modular theory to generate free will, I propose a dynamic version involving feedback loops. Consider crossing a busy street. Assuming a degree of urgency and an oncoming car, we can suppose a person of reckless character would dash right out. while a timid person would wait. In the reckless person, the go module would oscillate with a greater frequency than the wait and quickly cross the threshold into action. In the timid person, vice versa. An indecisive person with oscillations of equal frequency may fail to decide until it is too late for the go option to be tenable. Feedback occurs when our impetuous runner is nearly run over and is cursed out by the car's driver. Now chastised, the hothead may consciously reset the oscillation frequency for the go and wait modules to be more cautious. This assumes that there is a two-way interaction between the brain and consciousness. How this occurs is a mystery locked up inside the body-mind problem. The same feedback applies not only to snap decisions, but also to decisions emanating from our moral core. Consider Artie, who has found a wallet containing $500 on the back seat of a taxi. Having turned it in, Artie is rewarded with a thank you, but has a good feeling about it. Coincidentally, 3 months later, in another cab, the same thing. At this point, Artie is unemployed and would have appreciated a reward. The good feeling has evaporated. A month after that, facing eviction and unable to afford a cab, Artie sees a man up ahead drop his wallet on the sidewalk, again with $500. This time, the module for pocketing the wallet drowns out the one for calling, "Hey, mister, you dropped your wallet," and Artie walks away with it. Artie recognizes that her character has changed as a result of feedback from the experience. How does indecision demonstrate that we can't be predetermined? We can show the mechanism of the modular theory not to be predetermined through consideration of the state of indecision. Suppose you're sure that the answer to the last multiple choice test question is either A or D. Your neural modules oscillate at around 50% without reaching the threshold to decide. Suddenly, the docent says to put all pencils down. Your hurry and decide module intervenes to choose whichever pattern happened to dominate at that moment. With no reason for a conscious veto, you mark the paper as you put the pencil down. Unless one adheres to the hard version of determinism, the choice of A or D was not foreseeable even in principle. It seems possible that this example could be tested in the future with advances in appropriate technology. Can the theory explain willpower as well as free will? The modular theory also explains weakness of will, recognized by Aristotle as akrasia, and in our kitchens as the strong desire to eat the extra slice of chocolate cake. In this case, the battle between the eat and don't eat modules can be swayed over time by the combination of the illness we feel after indulging and by the ability of our minds over time to fortify our willpower. This can be done by channeling feelings of disgust from the brain's amygdala into the oscillating circuits for the don't eat module. What about determinism and creativity? Popper noted that determinism was objectionable because it also destroyed the idea of creativity, that we're responsible for thinking of anything new. My belief is that the mechanism of oscillating modules representing ideas competing for attention that gives us plastic control of our will is the same as that which can generate a flash of inspiration. This occurs when a subconscious problem-solving module suddenly links to a module representing a solution one never would have consciously expected. It is also a vital part of one's sense of humor and the art of witty extemporization. No plausible model has been proposed whereby these surprising insights could be predetermined. Yet Edward de Bono, with his ideas on lateral thinking, has shown how we can train our minds to facilitate the experience. It would be difficult to argue, based on our ignorance of the subconscious, that we could have flashes of inspiration, but not free will. To conclude, my modular plastic control theory allows that we are adequately but incompletely determined and that we possess genuine free will. This results from the plastic control predicted by Karl Popper and is based on subconscious modular mechanisms subject to conscious feedback. It is then able to maintain consistency of character and, on occasion, to extemporize. We are free because the mechanism allows us to choose, and responsible because the mechanism governing our choice allows us to feel the choice was ours. The extent of the role of chance or generative uncertainty in the decision-making is hidden by the mechanism, but sufficient to preclude determinism. My theory means free will is compatible not with determinism, but with random chance. In effect, we claim freedom through a plastic control, the uncertainty of which we don't fully understand, but for which we feel an emotional need. Through this plastic control mechanism, we are neither clouds nor clocks, but in between them, free.